I had the space advantage for the entire game and used it to win it. This is round 1 of the Metropolitan Open, and yeah, I'm here in Dulles, Virginia, and I'm playing. This is one of the many DMV chess tournaments throughout the year that is 2-day or 3-day, and the time control is game in 110 minutes plus 10-second bonus per move. I actually don't like this time control as much as game in 90 plus 30, but it is what it is. And I'm playing a floored 1700 in this first round. He only recently became floored. Looking at his USCF chart last week, he played a tournament and went down to his floor. So happens to the best of us. And in this game, I started out with e4. And this is no engine recap until the very end of this video. And so hopefully we'll both learn something through this process of looking through this game. And he played the Alekines. And so immediately you probably now understand why I had more space in this game. Is because he waved the red flag and gave me all the space. I love playing the 4 pawns attack. This is the most ambitious approach, saying you're going to give me space, yes, yes, and yes. And it's so easy for black to go wrong, and also kind of easy for white to go wrong in some cases. There's that famous saying from a movie, that with great space comes great responsibility. And this is definitely one of those situations where black is going to try to undermine white's pawn structure, and in some cases maybe it's going to be overextended. So he develops his bishop, plays e6. I develop my knight, and now he plays knight b4. In the past, I've seen people go bishop e7, castles, and then play for f6. And then I've also seen people go queen d7 and castles queenside. So there's different ways for black to approach it. Knight b4 is not one of the main 2 ways. And, he's threatening a fork on c2, so I just defend against the fork. I play rook c1, and now he plays c5. From a distance, I thought this wasn't possible, because I thought I could just play d takes c5, and I was like, oh, you can't take the pawn back. But then I realized, oh, wait, this is actually not so easy, because queen takes queen, and if rook takes, there's knight c2 check, and picking up the dark third bishop, and then bishop takes c5 check. And I was like, this cannot be good. There are no... maybe I can go king f4, and I'm really close to winning king of the hill, but I don't think that's the objective of this game. So, and if I take back with the king, now there's rook check, rook d8 check, and if I drop back with my knight to block the check, there's knight d7, attacking both pawns. And yeah, I don't think this is very good. And I even thought about knight takes d1, but probably once again knight d7, eyeing both pawns, and it's really tough to defend the c5 pawn. In this specific case, I might be able to do a3, and if he goes back, then I can play b4. But the issue is knight c2 check, and guarded by his bishop, and then he takes, and then takes. And yeah, I have a queenside majority, so I'm probably not worse, but I'm probably not better either. Well, I'm probably still better, to be honest. But maybe this is not what I want. Actually, looking more at this position, maybe I should go for this. Because it seems pretty simple and straightforward. Knight d7, a3, check here, takes, and if knight takes, b4, it actually doesn't look that bad. There's knight d3 check, takes, and it's a classic knights versus bishops game. But my knights look pretty good. They're very well developed. He's still behind development. Maybe I should have gone for this, actually, in hindsight. Because I still have the 3-on-2 on the queen side. So I think it's actually pretty decent looking at it now, visually. Anyways, but after c5, I just play a3 immediately. So I don't play d takes c5. I wasn't convinced that it was winning it enough. And then he went back to a6. I thought he might take on d4 and then play knight c6. And then I have a choice. Do I take on c6 or do I take on f5, or do I do neither of those things? I probably would have taken on f5 in the moment during the game. I was calculating taking on f5, and if he trades queens, he doesn't have to, and takes here. I thought this endgame is probably much better for me. I could probably start with knight d5. I and c7. It's probably the best place to start. And after rook c7 or rook c8, I mean, I once again have a choice. I might be able to go knight takes a7, because if he takes back with his knight, then his other knight is hanging. This seems pretty decent, to be honest. So all endgames are pretty good, and I could even take on c6 as well. I don't have to take on f5. So I wasn't afraid of him taking on d4, but instead he goes back to a6, because now, so a knight on the rim is dim, and in this case his knight doesn't seem particularly good. It is guarding the c5 pawn, but it's not very impressive here because now I play d5. My other option is to play bishop e2, just developing, getting closer to castling, and now if he takes, and if he's trying to maintain the bishop pair, he can retreat, and then I can just castle. And in this position, this is probably much better for white as well, because white has finished development, white has the open f file. Maybe bishop d3 will continue to try to trade off the defender of this f7 pawn, and let's say bishop e3, bishop e7, for example. Bishop d3. If castles, I guess I could probably just take, pawn takes, and knight e4 maybe, try to continue like this and push my queenside majority as well. So definitely seems very pleasant. Like every position I'm coming across is very pleasant. Okay. But instead of that, I play d5, which I thought that was most enterprising move. It's definitely the most ambitious move. Just being like, I'm gonna gain even more space. I got 2 pawns on the 5th rank, and maybe I'll get 2 pawns on the 6th rank. You never know. If he does take this pawn once, now my bishop opens up to the b5 square and attacking his a6 knight, and his bishop on f5 might be a little loosey goosey. So. It's a bit dangerous. And so after d5, he ignores it and plays h6. My hotel roommate Will was saying that f6 actually is probably a more interesting move, and I agree. Actually, I think f6 we would get positions that's more commonly seen in other Alekhine positions. So like if f6, I probably don't want to take. I could take. Taking is probably fine, but I don't have to take. I actually might be able to go bishop g5 in some cases. Actually, I'm just looking at it now. Bishop g5 in some cases could be kind of good. Like let's say I play bishop e2 first, then bishop e7, and castles, x-raying the queen. If he castles, it feels like there could maybe be some tactics here. I'm not sure. And maybe I play d6 at some point. I don't know if this pawn on d6 is a weakness or a strength. I actually don't know. But probably playing f6 is a way to keep the position more solid and not be so insane. But instead he played h6, and I played bishop e2. He played g5. So his idea is he's gonna push the kingside pawns, and after he played h6, I know g5 is coming, and I know g4 is an option. So in this position, if he does play g4, I can play knight d2, and if you ever try to win this pawn d5, your bishop is loose, and your bishop's hanging. So if he tries to defend his pawn, now I can go knight e4. So knight f3 to d2 to e4, and now once again you can't take on d5. If you take on e4, then I can just take back, and after pawn takes. If knight takes or queen takes, I can sacrifice the queen, go knight f6 check to pick up, and I'll be up a piece. So, very, very neat position. Everything's working out tactically. So instead of playing pawn to g4, he plays bishop g7, and now I play knight b5. I thought for a long time here on whether or not I've thought about for 13 minutes, I believe. Let's see. 17 minutes. I thought 17 minutes in this position because I was trying to find candidate moves and trying to figure out the best way to play. Part of me really want to play queen e1, but I couldn't really. Queen e1 is kind of appealing because I can meet g4. I have other options to meet g4. I can play. Well, okay, first let me back up. Firstly, if I play a nothing move like king h1, now g4, knight d2 and then bishop takes e5, and my center is falling. It might still be winning, it might still be okay, but it's like, is this really what I want to do? So there is that threat of g4 now. And if I play queen e1, I can meet g4 with two different moves that I couldn't before. One is knight h4, guarded by my queen. Okay, so his queen sees it, but my queen also. And if he takes, then I can take, and this looks pretty decent for me. I could also meet g4 with queen g3, pinning the pawn to the bishop. So if pawn takes, queen takes rook, rook h8, bishop takes h6, threatening the rook here. If you take, then I can take, and then here, and then take at a bare minimum. And then, so that looks pretty decent. I'm sure there's other options too. But I just couldn't justify it. In the moment, I thought pawn takes d5 after queen e1, pawn takes, knight takes, queen takes. The knight was attacking my bishop on e3. And if I go rook d1, there's queen e4, and if bishop d3, attacking queen g4. But from before, I forgot about the move h3, removing the queen's defense of the bishop. But the thing is, he also doesn't have to do that. He can go queen c6, but if he goes queen c6, I can go rook d6, and then if queen c7, then I actually don't know what I'm going to do. What am I going to do? I can go check, bishop e5 check, and this looks pretty appetizing because I'm getting in. He can't block because I just take, and I have two attackers. If he goes king e7 here, I have more choices to make on how to proceed. Bishop takes e5 is a threat. I could honestly go take on a6 and then go queen c3 here. Then queen takes c5. So if rook, let's say rook a c8 or rook h c8. Then I could continue my attack and maybe try to take the pawn on c5, or maybe take the pawn on a6. World is my oyster, and oysters are good. So this actually doesn't seem that bad for me. In the moment, though, in the game, I really wasn't sure how to meet the three different options: queen c6, queen e6, and queen e4. Queen e6, same thing. I think I can just go rook maneuver and probably just take the knight and go, actually probably not take the knight, probably go check first, king f8, then take, and then take. Like, this is probably decent enough. So yeah, I think I actually could have gone queen e1 immediately, but I was too afraid of losing the pawn on d5, and I was like, is this really good enough? And then I found another idea of just like knight b5. Knight b5, there's no risks to this move. It seems like just pretty decent. I thought he might castle. If he castles, I was going to play knight d6 anyways, attacking the bishop, attacking the pawn. So if he takes, his bishop's hanging, so he cannot take. If he goes bishop g6, then I have an option. I can take on e6 if I want to, and after e takes, go knight takes b7, win a pawn, maybe get close to winning a second pawn as well if I want it. I don't know if I want it. Probably knight d6, and there could be a tactic of winning a pawn. Actually, no, my queen guards the knight, so that tactic doesn't exist. And then bishop on g6 is hanging too. So yeah, I thought this was pretty decent. If he allowed my knight to get to d6, I thought it was pretty good. Yeah, and of course, you go bishop takes e5 to remove the defender of the knight. Then I can take, and now I'm up a piece, because if you take back, I take here. And yeah, you get f4 in, but who cares? Tomato, tomato. So after knight b5, he plays knight c8, guarding the d6 square. At this point, he is playing pretty fast still. He has 82 minutes. We started with 110 minutes, so he has 82 minutes still. And here I have, after knight b5, I have 67 minutes, and after knight c8, I think here for 30 minutes. Because I'm trying to figure out the best way to proceed. Part of me really wanted to play queen a4,
setting up a discovered checkmate, but he can just castle. And like, my queen is not really doing a great job here. Like, what am I even doing with my queen right now? So, and also after queen a4, I thought he might also have the option of knight b6. I think he actually does not have the option of knight b6, attacking my queen, because there's a double check, and if king e7, there's queen b5. If knight c7 attacking the queen, I can take the pawn on c5. So I don't think it's actually very good to go knight b6. So but he probably would have just castled with no issues. Oh, and my queen is not causing issues. That particular move isn't very good, I don't think. So after knight c8, now I play queen e1. And the reason why is that, if you take on d5 now, I can play rook d1, pinning the pawn to the queen. If you go d4, I can take the pawn with my f knight, opening up an attack on the bishop. So if you take, I can take, and the pawn is still pinned. You can't take my bishop. And if queen d7 here, you're attacking my rook. Doesn't matter. I can just retreat back to f1 or f2 or f3. Doesn't really matter too much. Maybe f1. And I'm going to win the pawn on d4 as well. I guess actually one thing I was not calculating was that after I go back, he can take the pawn on e5, which looks annoying. So I might have maybe went queen f1 here instead of bishop back or rook back to f1, because I want to defend my pawn, which seems pretty decent. And he can't go knight e7 because the f pawn would hang. If he castles, I can probably just take the pawn with my rook, and I'm doing quite okay here. So that was my little neat idea of queen e1, rook d1. And then so after queen e1, he plays castles, and now I play rook d1 anyways, setting up a discovered attack. So if he doesn't move his queen, he gets hit with an attack, and I'm going to win a pawn at a bare minimum. Maybe I don't even want to win a pawn. More importantly, I get my rook, or just as importantly, I get my rook behind my passed pawn. So if I push to d6, I can push to d7 more easily, and then d8 because my rook supports my pawn. So after he castles, I go rook d1, he goes queen e7, and here I make a committal decision to take more space. I go pawn to d6, and yes, oftentimes this pawn on e5 is very loosey-goosey, but I think it's actually completely okay. Here, you can't go queen e8 here to try to go to c6 because of d7. That's a fork. So he goes queen d7. He could have gone queen d8 as well. I don't know which one's better. I think they both look kind of sad. Queen d7. And the question is, now what? Now what? If I go h3 or something like that, maybe he's going to play knight b6. Maybe. And apply pressure on the c4 pawn, and maybe he'll try to go, try to win this e5 pawn somehow. So what's the way to proceed? How do you apply more pressure? Well, in this position, before playing d6, because I play my next move instantly. Because, I thought for 30 minutes, and every variation I was calculating involved this move b4 as a way to keep applying more pressure. And it's really neat. So let me actually rewind a little bit. For example, knight c8. One of the things I was calculating here, one of the reasons why I thought for 30 minutes, I was trying to evaluate d takes e6 with the idea that he cannot take my queen because I can take his pawn with check. So I do an in-between move, and then I win a pawn. So that was my idea. And so if he takes back, let's say he takes back with the e pawn if he wants to, then I can take, and after he takes back, I go put my rook on the open file, king e7, then there's b4 now. With the idea that if he takes, and takes, then bishop c5 check. Wins the knight. And in a lot of cases, even if he castles, b4, if pawn takes, knight takes b4, bishop c5 would be a fork on the rook on f8 and the knight on b4 anyways. So I thought that was like a neat little way to proceed here. And so anyways, so b4 was on my radar for a long time. So after queen d7, I played b4, and I thought he probably has to play like b6 here and maintain the pawn structure. I think that's very necessary here. His rook is a little bit loosey-goosey on a8, and maybe his knight is a little loose on a6 as well, but this is probably what you have to go for. What he did in the game, though, is after b4, he just stuck. And after I take back, like, wait a second, now my pawn can go to c5, and actually now I can start going on the a file and attacking his pieces there too. So now my attack, it continues, and and he's really cramped in this position. He plays knight b6, developing his knight, redeveloping his knight, I should say. And now I rotate my knight back to d4, attacking his bishop. If you try to maintain the bishop pair, which you probably shouldn't, there's c5 here, attacking his knight. And if you go knight d5 here, I was trying to remember why I thought I might have not played c5 if he did save his bishop. I might have not. One thing I could try to do is play b5 to try to play c5. I don't think that's actually that good though, because it's knight c5. I'm actually not super convinced I should push that pawn. Will did point out later in the game, or earlier in the game, that I can play knight takes a7 here. That's a nice little tactic here, removing guard of the knight on b6. I actually missed it, but my position is so nice with my center space that like it doesn't really matter. But I don't know if I would have played it if I saw it. I probably would have played it if I saw it. But I thought the way I play with like knight d4 and playing for c5 was very good. He probably should move his bishop back to g6. I think that makes it a bit tougher for me to win this game, or win quickly. And so he does put his rook on the open file, though, on the half open file, and now I just play c5. And if you go knight d5, I have a nice little trick here. I can go knight takes f5 here, defending my bishop. So the knight attacks the bishop, but I can take his bishop, defend my bishop, and if he takes, then his knight is no longer defended. So the pawn is like me when I eat too many tacos, overloaded. So after c5, he goes back to a8 with the knight, which is absolutely miserable. I thought he might sacrifice his knight for 2 pawns here and try to win this 3rd pawn as a way to just get his pieces out, because playing knight a8 is just so miserable that you might as well sacrifice a piece instead. And now I bring my bishop in. So this was, I really liked this reroute. I felt like a professional. I felt like I had a monocle on and was just like, yes, because I rotated my knight back to d4 so I could push my pawn and play bishop b5. So I put my bishop where my knight was. So I really like this maneuver. And then after I forced the queen back to the 6th rank, I took his knight. I could have taken his knight immediately and then played pawn to c6, and I have 2 pawns on the 6th rank. However, I thought he would probably just sacrifice his rook for the exchange and a pawn, and I was just like, this is still winning. This has to still be winning. However, why do this? I can be more patient. I'll go bishop b5 first, and then bishop takes a6, and then I'm gonna go rook a1 here and do my best Pac-Man impression and start eating up those pawns. Waka Waka style. So but after bishop rook a1, it does allow him some counterplay. Some as in actually a decent bit. I actually don't know what I should have done instead of rook a1. Maybe I could have honestly played h3 and just play a bit more slowly. Like h3 here, safeguard my king, create luft, stop g4 from happening. This actually seems very reasonable. This seems extremely reasonable. But instead I rushed things a little bit with the move rook a1, because now he plays bishop d3, and after rook f2, now he plays g4. And my knight doesn't have really that many great squares here. What I probably should do now is go knight d2. And if he takes my pawn, well, actually, this is his whole point. If he takes my pawn, I can take his pawn, but now my knight is hanging on d4, and if I take his rook, then he can take back and just maintain this pin, and maybe rook a3 is a move, but then he can move his bishop back, and his bishops are really good here. I think that's what he was hoping for. So that's why I played rook d2, attacking his bishop and guarding my knight. So he moves the bishop back to c4, and now I move my knight to h4. So my rook was blocking my queen's vision on h4, but now since I move my rook out of the way, counter-attacking, now my queen sees h4, and I can move my knight there. If he took my knight, I could take his bishop, and if you take my pawn, I was going to be happy with this position. I probably don't have to take the pawn back immediately. Maybe I can go queen g3 here, attacking g7. If you go king h8 here, I can probably go... I actually don't know what I would have played here. I might just start taking the queenside pawns. Like, that's definitely an option I can do if I want to. And my king's a bit loosey-goosey, but I think it's okay. So I would be happy if he chose that, but instead he went bishop c4, I go knight h4, and now he goes king h7. So I think he could and probably should take the pawn on e5, and after bishop takes h6, play bishop g7 here, and if after I take, he takes. Maybe he didn't like the fact that, you know, after queen g3, the pawn's hanging, and if f5, I actually don't think it's that bad. I don't know why he didn't like it. f4 is not a threat, so maybe rook e1 here. Rook e1 seems like a move for sure. So yeah, I thought he might go for this. But instead of that, he went king h7 to guard the h6 pawn. And then after I went queen g3, now he went h5, defending his pawn. So now, and one of my candidate moves was h3 in this position, h3 to break apart his structure, but I wasn't super convinced it was that good. And I honestly thought, you know what, like instead of, you know, after h5, let me just go rook c2 and say, what are you doing with your bishop? If you go back to b5, I can take, and go rook takes a7. And the key thing to be aware of, you know, on the white side is that f6, trying to remove the pawn on e5 and go bishop a6, my knight is actually trapped. My knight can't go, well actually, yeah, I can't go forward because the king covers that square, and the f5 square is covered by the pawn, and so is the f3 square, so the knight on the rim is dim. However, my knight is still better than his knight, which is completely blocked out. It is in the corner. It's not on the rim. It's in the corner. So that's the one good thing about this position for me, is that no matter how bad my knight on h4 is, it's not as bad as his knight on a8. So I'm asking him, what are you going to do with the bishop? And if he goes bishop d5, well, now he's going to take your pawn on a6, doing my Pac-Man impression. And so now he goes f6. And I blitz out bishop f4 because I saw this really neat idea. There's after pawn takes, bishop takes, my queen is like me when I eat too many tacos, overloaded. He can take my bishop, and after I take back, he takes my knight. So he wins a piece. However, I go rook a7 check. If you go forward with your king, I'm going to give a check. And, well, actually, no. I'm probably going to check with the queen, actually. And it's actually just checkmate. I thought he had from afar, I thought he had king f8, and then I would have played rook f2, but I miscalculated that. It would have just been checkmate immediately. So it's going to be checkmate no matter where he goes. So he has to block the check. So I win a knight, but I lose it, and then I would take, rook takes, pawn takes, and my pawn is one square away from promotion. And queen e1 is checkmate, but my queen blocks it. Queen f2, and then queen f1 would be checkmate, but my rook blocks it. So actually, everything is guarded. Everything is guarded here, which is absolutely beautiful about this position. And you know, so what I can do is, you know, if he plays g3, I'm just going to take it with the pawn, and I'm doing quite fine. I can play b5, b4, b7, or maybe b5, b6, c6, b7, and then just make a couple more queens. So that would have been a beautiful ending to this game. Sacrificing a knight, you know, having an overloaded queen on purpose to get this position. But after bishop f4, he sees my ideas and he just goes rook f7 here, guarding his pawn on a7. But now what my bishop f4 did, it was multi-purpose. It not only guarded e5, but it also opened the door for the queen d3 check. If you go back with your king, I thought he might do this. I can play queen g6 here or knight g6. It was actually really interesting if queen g6 after pawn takes. I could probably I would just take back with the bishop, and I think I'm doing quite good here. I'm up a pawn and only a pawn, and I still have 2 passed pawns. So, I mean, that's probably in it winning enough. But I thought this was a little bit more complicated. So he played f5, and I played knight takes f5, and he resigned. He resigned because if after pawn takes, knight takes, if he plays rook takes, then queen takes check, king g8, and he said I would have 4 passed pawns, and it was too much. He does have the bishop pair. I'll give him that much. He does have the bishop pair, but probably not the most important factor here. I wouldn't resign here. Actually, I might resign here because I was like, queen h4 is a checkmate in one threat that I might not see. But the rook is hanging with check after king h7. I could probably play a move like g3 here. After queen h3, there is no mate because I block it. There are no checks, and I can probably just pick up the knight on a8, and I'm winning from here. So after rook takes, and of course if he doesn't take, so after if he takes once and then goes king g8, what I can do is I can take the bishop on g7 and then take the bishop on d5. So the bishop opens up. My attack on the bishop opens up when my knight moves. And that was my round 1 game. So I ended the game with like 9 minutes on the clock, and I was actually getting kind of mad at some points because he was playing really fast, and I was just like, and I actually thought I might lose that game, because my position was getting kind of loose, especially around bishop d3, which I just missed as a resource, and then g4, and it was getting kind of scary. I mean, I'm sure I'm still much better here, but it's got a little bit scary around this part. But I was really happy to find the move rook takes a6 and bishop f4 here as a nice trick to just win the game. So that was very nice, and yeah, so I end the game with a win, and I think I'm playing Andrew Shimon in my second round, who I have played before, and I'm really excited because I beat him in 19 moves the last time I played him over a year ago. I expect this time around I will not beat him in 19 moves. I in fact think I'm most likely the underdog, but we shall see when we see when we see. So I'll have the game review. I'll see you guys later.